7 Costco watch brands everyone ignores. They're absolute gold mines. So don't be like me. I used Yo Speedwalk past the Costco watch case. I thought there was no way I could get quality watches at Costco. I was wrong. Somewhere between the rotisserie chickens and the tire center sits a run of watches most jewelry stores would kill to carry, and I'll tell you about them. Number 7. Bearing. $139-ish is the Costco price on a Bearing Solar Titanium Quartz watch, a piece that runs on light instead of a battery. Most shoppers walked right past the case without a second look, because almost nobody in America has heard of Bearing. That's not an accident. It's a Danish brand, and the origin story sounds invented, even though it isn't. A Danish businessman named René Kærskov jumped out of a helicopter over the Arctic. Sometime in the years around 2008 to 2010, depending on which company history you read, and came home wanting to build watches that felt like the landscape underneath him. Minimal, clean, built for cold that would put most people in a hospital bed. The name itself comes from Vitus Bering, the explorer who crossed the strait later named after him. That's the whole design philosophy in one word. Pick something vast and unforgiving, then build a watch that survives it without needing to shout about it. The watches are made in China, and Bering doesn't hide it under vague, Swiss-inspired phrasing on the box. What the brand refuses to compromise on is materials. High-tech ceramic, sapphire crystal, titanium cases so light you forget you're wearing metal at all. And the solar collection runs on any light source, not just direct sun through a window. Once the cell tops off, the watch keeps running for months without seeing daylight again. No battery, no winding, no thought required. Bering barely advertises in the US. No stadium sponsorship or influencer unboxing videos flooding your feed every January. There are no department store counters with a rep steering you toward it over something flashier. That silence is the entire reason it sits in a Costco case at a fraction of what it runs through European retailers. You're not paying a premium for name recognition here because there isn't any recognition to pay for. You're paying for the object itself, stripped of the marketing weight most brands charge you for carrying. Watch collectors online sometimes place Bering next to Skagen, another Danish name built on the same stripped-back aesthetic. The comparison usually favors Bering on materials alone. Skagen leans further into fashion cycle design and smartwatch crossovers, while Bering has stayed narrowly focused on ceramic, titanium, and solar charging as its entire identity, refusing to chase every trend that passes through the category. Bering wasn't a solo project either. Kærskov built the brand alongside 2 co-founders, and the origin story the company still tells today centers on that Arctic jump as the moment the whole design language clicked into place. Cold weather materials, glacier-inspired color palettes, and a refusal to add ornamentation that doesn't serve a purpose. It's a small brand by global standards, but it has stayed remarkably disciplined about not becoming something else just to chase a bigger paycheck. The honeymoon with a Bering is quiet. There's no reveal moment, no unboxing spectacle. You put it on, and a week later you realize you haven't thought about it once, which for a watch is close to the highest compliment available. It just works, silently, the way a good pair of glasses disappears on your face after the first few days. Picture the woman who grabbed one because it was the only titanium piece under $300 in the case that afternoon. 2 years on, it still looks like it just left the factory floor. She still can't pronounce the brand confidently out loud at a dinner party. She just knows it hasn't let her down once, and that's a better track record than half the names people actually recognize. If you asked her to name a single luxury watch brand off the top of her head, she probably couldn't. She'd just point at her wrist. Bering is the brand nobody's heard of. Brand number 6 is the one everyone's heard of and completely misjudged. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 6, Luminox. We need something that survives a night dive and still tells us the time when it matters. That was roughly the request back in the early 1990s, when a Navy SEAL training and evaluation officer named Nick North went looking for a watch reliable enough to trust underwater, in the dark, with actual lives depending on it. He found Luminox. What came out of that partnership wasn't a fashion accessory dressed up in tactical language. It was gear, tested the way gear gets tested, by people who don't have the luxury of a watch failing at the wrong moment. The tubes inside a Luminox dial contain a small, sealed amount of tritium, and they glow constantly on their own. No light exposure needed to charge them. No button to press before you can read the dial in the dark. That glow lasts up to 25 years before it fades past real usefulness, which means the watch someone buys today will likely outlive its own illumination technology by decades. The case on the Navy SEAL line is built from Carbonox, a reinforced polymer that shrugs off impacts that would crack a steel case wide open. This is gear that special operations units have actually worn on missions, not merchandise with a military logo bolted onto the dial for a marketing bump. So why is a brand this serious sitting at Costco next to a bearing and a rack of children's backpacks? Because Luminox was never chasing the boutique crowd, not once in its history. The brand built its entire identity on function, and function doesn't require a flagship store on Fifth Avenue to prove itself. It needs the watch to work in the dark, underwater, in freezing temperatures, without complaint, and without a service center on speed dial. It has water resistance to 200 meters, a screw-down crown that locks tight, a bezel you can read at a glance in truly bad light, the kind where most dials just disappear entirely. Strap one on and there's a certain heft to it, a rubber and steel weight that feels less like jewelry and more like equipment you'd trust on a job site. That weight is not an accident. It's the whole point. The brand's second generation, the Colormark line, arrived in 2007, larger than the original and available with colored light tubes, blue, orange, yellow, on top of the standard ice blue glow. Collectors treat that release as the moment Luminox stopped being a single cult object and became an actual product family. One with enough range that a buyer could pick a color the way you'd pick a strap, without ever touching the underlying reliability that made the first model famous. The regret timestamp on this one belongs to anyone who spent hundreds of dollars on a tactical watch from a brand that never worked with an actual operator, only to later learn the original, still sitting quietly at Costco, is the one real operators actually wore into the water. Plenty of newer, tactical-styled brands have leaned on aggressive branding and camouflage packaging to imply a pedigree they never earned. Luminox earned its version the slow way, one mission at a time, decades before it was fashionable to look tactical at all. Somewhere, a former Navy diver still wears his old Luminox in civilian life, decades after his last deployment, not because it photographs well, but because it's the one watch that never once gave him a reason to doubt it at 0400 in open water. He doesn't take it off for weddings, funerals, or job interviews. It's just the watch that's always on his wrist, the same way it was always on his wrist during the years that actually mattered, the years nobody else in the room knew anything about. That one earned its reputation underwater. Brand number 5 earned its reputation by quietly building the company that makes half the luxury watches you already respect. Number 5. Tissot. Here's the contradiction nobody sits with long enough to notice. Tissot sells at Costco for a few $100s, sandwiched on the shelf between Bulova and Citizen like it's just another mall brand name competing for the same casual buyer. And yet, Tissot and Omega share a direct corporate bloodline that stretches back almost a century, one most people wearing either brand have never once been told about. In 1930, after a financial crisis had gutted the Swiss watch trade and left half the industry scrambling, Tissot merged with Omega to form the SSIH, the industrial group that would eventually fold into what we now call the Swatch Group. That merger wasn't a footnote buried in a corporate filing somewhere. It's the literal ancestor of the conglomerate that today owns Omega, Longines, and Tissot under one roof, sharing engineering, sharing supply chains, sharing decades of accumulated movement technology. When you buy a Tissot at Costco, you are not buying a knockoff cousin trying to imitate Omega's prestige from the outside. You're buying a watch made inside the exact same corporate family, using movement technology developed and refined across that same family, priced at a fraction of what the flagship sibling costs on the wall of an authorized dealer. The brand itself dates back to 1853, founded in the small Swiss town of Le Locle by Charles Félicien Tissot and his son Charles, Émile. They produced over 1,000 watches in that very first year alone, back when volume manufacturing for watches was still a startling new idea, rather than an industry standard. Tissot built the world's first anti-magnetic pocket watch. It made the first pocket watch with dual time zones. It made a watch out of granite once, and a separate one out of wood, purely to prove the case material could be anything the brand decided it should be. None of that history is why people buy the Tissot Le Local or the Couturier Powermatic off the Costco shelf, though. They buy it because it's a clean, automatic, Swiss-made watch for the price of a mid-range phone upgrade. The Couturier alone carries an 80-hour power reserve, enough to sit in a drawer over a long weekend and still be keeping correct time when you pick it back up Monday morning. A spec plenty of watches costing several times as much still can't match. What most buyers are never told is that they're buying into the same manufacturing ecosystem that produces watches costing 10 times as much, wearing the same engineering lineage on a much smaller budget. I keep coming back to this one, honestly, because it's the clearest case on this entire list of a brand hiding its own pedigree in plain sight, wrapped in a price tag too modest to hint at what's actually behind it. Tissot isn't underpriced by accident. It's positioned that way on purpose, as the affordable front door into a conglomerate that would rather sell you a $300 entry point today than lose you to a completely different watch company for the next 20 years. The Swatch Group today runs nearly 20 watch brands under one roof, from Tissot at the entry point all the way up to Breguet at the very top of the pyramid, with Omega and Longines occupying the tiers in between. Tissot's job inside that structure has always been volume. Sell enough watches at a low enough price to keep the whole machine profitable while the flagship names above it chase prestige. Costco just happens to be one of the more efficient places that volume strategy quietly plays out, moving real Swiss inventory at real Swiss margins, just without the marble floors and the espresso machine in the corner of the boutique. The regret, if you can call it that, shows up years later, at a dinner or a work event, when someone asks what watch is on your wrist and you shrug and say, just a Tissot from Costco, like it's nothing worth mentioning. It isn't nothing. It's the family tree of a brand people pay $30,000 to wear, minus 3 zeros, and most of the marketing. Tissot hides a bloodline in plain sight. Brand number 4 hides an actual lawsuit. Number 4, Movado. What everyone gets wrong about Movado is assuming that black dial with the single gold dot is just a design choice, a nice minimalist flourish someone dreamed up in a boardroom. It isn't. It's the result of a fight that took decades to resolve, and the losing side didn't live to see the resolution land in his favor. In 1947, an American industrial designer named Nathan George Horwit built a dial with nothing on it but 2 hands and a single dot at 12 o'clock, meant to represent the sun sitting at high noon. He shopped the design around for years, barely making real money from it, while a version of that dial started appearing on Movado watches without his name attached and without his consent. The dispute dragged on across decades, through legal filings and quiet corporate delay, until Horwit finally settled with Movado in 1975 for $29,000, and only after his design had already been accepted into New York's Museum of Modern Art as a permanent piece back in 1960. So that museum dial branding Movado leans on so heavily in every ad? It's named after the actual museum that recognized the design as genuine art, years before the company profiting from it paid the man who made it anything close to a fair price. Movado itself goes back to 1881, founded in Switzerland by a 19-year-old entrepreneur, and the name translates to "always in motion" in Esperanto, a constructed language almost nobody speaks anymore outside watch trivia and old crossword puzzles. Here's the detail that should stop you cold, though. On Costco's own product pages for several current Movado models, there's a line stating plainly that Costco is not an authorized dealer of the merchandise. Not buried in fine print you'd need a magnifying glass to find. Right there on the listing, in plain language, for anyone willing to actually read past the price. And Costco's own return guarantee still applies regardless, whether the manufacturer likes that arrangement or not. Did you know Costco isn't always an authorized dealer for the watches it sells? Tracked warehouse pricing on the Movado Luno has shown it sitting around $400, a stainless steel piece carrying the same museum dial design language the brand built its entire identity around, at a fraction of what an equivalent model runs through a mall jeweler with rent to cover and a commissioned sales staff to pay. That single disclosed line rewrites the entire relationship between Costco and the luxury watch world that most shoppers assume exists. Brands don't necessarily choose to be sold there at all. Costco simply buys inventory through channels the brand doesn't fully control, then backs the sale with a guarantee stronger than plenty of authorized dealers offer in the first place. Warranty politics be damned. Picture the buyer standing at the case, turning a Movado Bold over in her hands, having no idea the dot on the dial in front of her came out of a settlement that took nearly 30 years to close. The Bold line itself leans on ceramic cases and ion-plated finishes rather than the original dress watch silhouette. A deliberate move toward a younger buyer who has likely never heard Horwitz's name and never will unless somebody tells the story out loud, the way we just did. It's worth sitting with the fact that Movado's most enduring commercial asset almost didn't belong to Movado at all. An outside designer built the dial. A museum validated it as art before the company that sells it ever fully credited him. And decades later, that same company sells the design's descendants at a discount warehouse next to bulk cereal, without so much as a nod to where the 12 o'clock dot actually came from. The irony sharpens further once you notice the name itself. Always in motion, stamped across a brand whose defining design achievement came from standing perfectly still on someone else's idea for the better part of 30 years before finally settling up. Movado's dial came out of a fight nobody won cleanly or quickly. The next brand's story starts in an actual cockpit. Number 3. Glycine, Vietnam. Sometime in the late 1960s, a pilot straps on a Glycine airman before a mission because the GMT function built into its bezel lets him track 2 time zones at once without doing mental math mid-flight, while everything else demands his attention. NASA astronaut Pete Conrad reportedly wore one too, admiring it enough to be photographed with it on his wrist during his own career. This wasn't a marketing legend invented decades after the fact by a copywriter. This was the watch actually doing its job, in the cockpit, under real pressure, for people whose lives depended on getting the time zone math correct on the first try. Glycine goes back to 1914, founded in Bienne, Switzerland, by a watchmaker named Eugène Mélin. The Airman collection became the brand's defining signature the moment it introduced a proper GMT complication built specifically for pilots and international travelers, decades before GMT watch turned into a marketing buzzword every brand eventually slapped onto anything wearing a 2-tone bezel. The version sitting in a Costco case today runs on the GL293 movement, Glycine's own name for a modified Sellita base, itself built on expired ETA patents from decades earlier. That's not a downgrade dressed up in nicer language. It's how the entire mid-tier Swiss industry has kept its prices sane ever since ETA started rationing its e-watches to outside brands years back. The bracelet still says Swiss-made, honestly, because every part of that claim holds up under real scrutiny. There's a companion line worth knowing too, the Combat series, built for divers rather than pilots, sharing the same BN factory and the same no-nonsense case design. Collectors sometimes compare Glycine to Certina and Oris for this exact reason. All 3 built their names on tool watch honesty rather than showroom polish, and all 3 still get quietly overlooked by buyers chasing more famous logos. None of the 3 ever needed a celebrity ambassador to justify the price on the tag. In 2016, the Invicta Group bought Glycine outright, and that acquisition did something a lot of longtime collectors didn't expect at the time. It triggered real, sustained discounting on existing Airman stock, the same stock that used to trade well above $1,000 on the used market among enthusiasts. Suddenly, a genuine automatic aviation watch with a documented war-era pedigree was sitting new for under $400 inside a Costco warehouse. No bidding war required. Tracked warehouse pricing has shown the Airman GMT sitting around $400, down from a $500 list price at the same location. Compare that to what a comparable automatic GMT with a documented military lineage typically commands from a boutique dealer, often closer to $700 or $800 before any discount, and the gap stops looking like a coincidence and starts looking like the entire reason this brand belongs on this list at all. The regret timestamp for this one belongs to the collector who spent years hunting a vintage Airman on auction sites, paying double for a scratch dial and a service history full of question marks, only to realize a brand new one with the same GMT function was sitting 3 aisles past the paper towels the entire time, sapphire crystal included. There's an odd footnote in the Airman's own history worth knowing. Vintage collectors still refer to one rare early variant simply as the Chief, a nickname tied to an old advertising line rather than any official model name, and nobody who owns a modern reissue at Costco has any idea that quirky bit of brand folklore even exists. It's the kind of detail that only surfaces once you go looking past the spec sheet. Somewhere, a retired pilot still owns his father's old Airman, the case worn thin at the lugs, and has no idea a modern descendant of that same watch is sitting on a Costco shelf right now for less than he'd pay to have his father's original serviced. Glycine flew missions over Vietnam. The next brand quietly builds the kind of movement other Swiss brands wish they could afford to make themselves. Number 2. Frederique Constant. There's a specific kind of watch brand that gets underestimated the second people hear the phrase accessible luxury, as if the words were an apology for not costing enough. Frederique Constant earned that label, honestly, and then spent decades proving it should mean something considerably better than cheap. Founded in Geneva in 1988 by Peter Stoss and Aletta Stoss-Bax, the brand set out with a strikingly difficult goal for the era: build real in-house Swiss movements, not just assemble outsourced parts under a Swiss-sounding name, and keep the prices low enough that people who weren't already wealthy could actually buy in without saving for years. By 2004, the brand had its first true manufacture caliber running, the FC 910, complete with an open heartbeat window that let owners watch the balance wheel tick through an aperture cut straight into the dial. From there, the in-house movement count kept climbing steadily. Tourbillons, perpetual calendars, a world timer released in 2012 that undercut every other complicated travel watch on the market by thousands of dollars, at a moment when a true in-house world timer complication simply didn't exist anywhere near that price. The brand kept pushing into strange corners most Swiss houses avoided entirely. In 2007, it introduced silicon components to fight magnetism. In 2015, it became the first traditional Swiss watchmaker to release a connected smartwatch, years before that idea stopped sounding like a contradiction in terms. Not every experiment landed, but the willingness to try one at all says something most accessible brands never bother attempting. The Slimline collection tells a subtler version of the same story. Ultra-thin cases built around in-house movements at a fraction of what a comparably slim piece costs from brands with more prestigious names stitched onto the dial. Frederique Constant never tried to be the loudest name in the case. It tried to be the one that could actually back up its own engineering claims, which turned out to be a much harder promise to keep. At Costco, the Automatic Classics model has turned up around $500, a watch that still carries a genuine Swiss automatic movement, and the kind of dial finishing you'd normally expect from something costing considerably more on a boutique shelf. The same reference through a standard authorized retailer routinely lists several $100s higher before any of the brand's actual complicated pieces even enter the conversation. But this is the fact that quietly ties the whole list together, so stay with me here. In 2002, Frederique Constant acquired a struggling Swiss brand with a much older pedigree and a distinctive red triangle logo. In 2016, Citizen Group bought Frederique Constant outright, and that acquisition brought the older sister brand along in the same transaction, almost as an afterthought in the press coverage. We haven't named that sister brand yet on this list. We will in a moment, because it's sitting at number 1, in this exact Costco case, right now, and almost nobody buying either watch realizes the two brands share both an owner and a shared history stretching back over a century. Have you ever bought two brands not realizing they're owned by the same company? So, we're not losing the casual customers who wander past both watches without a second glance. We're losing the ones who'd actually light up realizing 2 of these 7 watches came from the exact same family tree, if only somebody had bothered to point it out. Frederique Constant quietly owns the answer to this final entry. Now meet the brand it rescued. Number 1. Alpina. In 1883, A watchmaker named Gottlieb Hauser pulled together a group of independent Swiss watchmakers into a union they called the Alpinists. They named the resulting brand Alpina. By 1913, Alpina was supplying high-precision chronometers to the German Navy. By 1921, the brand was building watches specifically for continental air forces, at a moment when aviation itself was barely 2 decades old. In 1938, it introduced the Alpina 4, a design built around durability, water resistance, and shock protection that essentially invented the modern concept of the sport watch, as we understand the category today, decades before that phrase became a standard line item on every brand's website. The red triangle stamped on the dial isn't decoration. It's a trademark the brand has carried since those earliest tool watch days, a mark meant to signal a precision instrument built for people who actually needed it to function, not people who needed it to merely look expensive across a dinner table. And this is the payoff from 2 brands ago, the one we promised you earlier. Alpina is that sister brand. Frederic Constant acquired Alpina in 2002, pulling it back from years of quiet commercial decline. And when Citizen Group bought Frederic Constant in 2016, Alpina came along in that same transaction, folded quietly into a much larger Japanese conglomerate's watch portfolio. 2 watches, sitting in the very same Costco case, under the very same corporate parent, with over a century separating their founding stories. One built its modern reputation quietly assembling in-house Swiss movements for a new generation of buyer. The other built its original reputation supplying navies and air forces before either world war had even finished reshaping the map of Europe. Tracked warehouse pricing has shown an automatic Alpina Startimer selling at Costco for around $400, marked down from a list price near $800 at the same warehouse. That's an automatic movement, not the cheaper quartz version, carrying a 140-year military and sporting pedigree behind it. Alpina's own current lineup of automatic Startimer models runs from roughly $800 up toward $1,800 through an authorized dealer, which makes the Costco price look less like a deal and more like an oversight somebody forgot to correct. Picture the buyer who grabs the Alpina simply because the dial looked clean and the price felt fair, with zero idea that the case on his wrist traces back to chronometers built for an actual navy over a century earlier. He'll never know unless somebody tells him directly. That's the entire premise sitting underneath this whole list. Alpina hasn't stood still on Old Glory either. The brand now runs an Alpiner X Smart line alongside its mechanical collection and partners with the National Parks Foundation on conservation-themed releases. Proof that a 140-year-old tool watchmaker can still chase a modern buyer without pretending its own history never happened. And that closes the loop on this entire countdown. 2 brands, 7 and 8 decades apart in temperament. One born from a union of watchmakers who wanted sturdier gear, and one born from a Dutch couple who wanted honest complications at a fair price. Now folded into the exact same ownership structure and sitting 3 feet apart in the exact same Costco aisle on the exact same shelf under the exact same fluorescent lighting. Nobody put a sign up explaining the connection. We just did. None of these 7 brands ever needed a flagship boutique on a prestige street to prove they were real. They needed exactly one thing: someone willing to look past the parking lot and the bulk toilet paper long enough to actually read the label in front of them. Every one of them earned its history somewhere else first, in a cockpit, a Navy contract, a museum dispute, a corporate merger, and only ended up at Costco afterward, almost as an accident of distribution, rather than a downgrade in quality. Which of these 7 have you actually owned? Let me know in the comments, like this video, and subscribe.